Attorneys for Ghislaine Maxwell made a final pitch to the Supreme Court. They're asking justices to overturn her 2021 conviction for conspiring with Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse young girls, saying it violates an agreement that Epstein made back in 2008 that shielded any co-conspirators from prosecution. The Justice Department wants the High Court to reject her appeal, but Maxwell's attorney said this in a statement, quote, "We're appealing not only to the Supreme Court, but to the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat Ghislaine Maxwell for Epstein's crimes, especially when the government promised she would not be prosecuted," end quote. Meantime, a source tells CNN that Maxwell received limited immunity to talk with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about the Epstein files last week. Those discussions were not mentioned in today's filing. Now, this morning, President Trump said that he is not ruling out a pardon for Maxwell, saying that he just hasn't been approached. Here's more from the president.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. It's in the news about that aspect of it, but right now it would be inappropriate to talk about it.
Let's get some perspective on all these developments with retired New York Supreme Court Judge Dianne Kiesel. Judge, thanks so much for being with us. So Maxwell asking the Supreme Court to review her conviction. Are you anticipating that justices will take up this appeal?
Hard to say. It's really a very simple issue. Ghislaine Maxwell says that the government has promised that future co-conspirators would not be prosecuted. Depends on your definition of government, actually, because there are 93 United States attorneys in this country. Only one, Mr. Acosta in the Southern District of Florida, signed off on this agreement. And the question becomes whether that binds the United States attorney in the Southern District. The Justice Department for years has said it does not. The Second Circuit, which is the circuit in which Ms. Maxwell was tried, says it does not, as does the circuit, which is the Midwest. In the brief to the Supreme Court, Maxwell's lawyers indicate, well, there is some split in the circuits, and certainly the Supreme Court can elect to adjudicate when there is a split in the circuit. The question becomes, is this enough of one? Is this a big enough case that they would want to do that?
So there are two avenues that her attorneys are pursuing. It's not just this filing before the Supreme Court. It's also, in their statement, this direct appeal to President Trump for what they view as justice. Her attorney is suggesting that she should receive a pardon, perhaps, with Trump saying that he has the power to do so, but he hasn't been approached about it. I wonder, what, if anything, in your eyes, might justify a pardon for her?
Well, let's remember what she was convicted of. She was not convicted of assisting Jeffrey Epstein in procuring, if you will, women. These were children. These were girls. This is the sex trafficking of children. Yes, Donald Trump is correct. Legally, he can give her a pardon if he wants. I think it's playing with dynamite, particularly since it's his base that ignited this latest firestorm about a lack of disclosure in the whole Epstein debacle, right? So I think it would be a difficult move for him to make. Doesn't mean he wouldn't make it. Also quite interesting is the fact that while he may be considering a pardon, his Department of Justice has filed a response to Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers saying that her prosecution was perfectly justifiable under the law. Very interesting.
Yeah, on Friday, we should also note that she was given limited immunity to talk to the deputy AG. A source described that immunity as standard. Why would she need immunity at this point to take part in that interview?
Well, because she's still, she's got an appeal pending, right? In addition, someday, if she doesn't get pardoned, she will be up for parole, and she wants to be sure that whatever she may say will not be used against her. That's pretty standard. The interesting question here, though, is, Todd Blanche is the one speaking to Ms. Maxwell and her lawyers. What role is he playing right now? Is he the president's former lawyer, or is he representing the United States of America as a high-ranking official in the Department of Justice? It's all a big question mark, isn't it?
Judge Diane Kiesel, thank you so much for your perspective.
Jeffrey Epstein's convicted accomplice and former girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell may be looking for a presidential pardon. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for conspiring with Epstein to sexually abuse young girls. Last week, she was granted limited immunity to speak with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about the Epstein files. Today, her attorneys are making their final pitch to the Supreme Court to try to persuade the justices to consider overturning her criminal conviction. Joining me now, former Manhattan prosecutor Jeremy Sallin. Jeremy, good to see you as always. So we look at the limited immunity is fairly standard, the way I understand it, when there's a questioning that is happening, like what we saw with the Deputy AG Todd Blanche last week with Ghislaine Maxwell in Florida. Realistically, he said we'll get information on what they discussed, at the appropriate time, were his words. What do you expect to learn from those meetings?
I don't think that is going to be made public. These proffer agreements, which are routine and regular, and that limited immunity, so if you lie, it can be used against you, but that limited immunity is not atypical. But that's also shared internally and making prosecutorial decisions, and it's up to discretion of the prosecutors what they want to share publicly, but at the same time, understanding that the public may want to know and Trump's base may want to know. That's not the principle that really should be guiding the Department of Justice. It should be, what, if anything, should we do with the information that we are given? Should we pursue other people? Is this going to lead to further investigation? Is this going to increase and add to additional prosecution? We'd like to think that opportunity would have happened a long time ago if there was something to pursue when she was originally prosecuted. But those are the types of questions that they're going to ask internally, but not necessarily share it publicly.
Mm-hmm. Well, to that point, sort of two questions. In terms of information that was shared previously, to be at this point where she is now, serving 20 years, a 20-year sentence after being convicted, her attorney said she's been cooperative, essentially, but, not saying that saying, hey, sure, she would love a pardon, right, if that's possible. I mean, if she had something that she wanted to share, isn't that something that would have come up already?
Yeah, you would think that at that point in time, when she was initially prosecuted, she would have offered up information, say, listen, save myself, here's what I have, and they would have assessed her credibility, understanding that there's always an agenda to an accused, meaning they could still be honest and upfront, but at the same time, they want to free themselves of incarceration or the stigma, and worse, of a felony conviction on the federal level. But yeah, you would expect it to come up before, and what she may have may be incredibly valuable. But remember, this is a person who is insisting on her innocence and saying, I didn't even do any of this. And to say, as her attorney said, that they're not necessarily looking for something and they're being upfront and honest here, I think that really defies credibility. There's certainly an agenda, and whether or not that fits the Department of Justice agenda, I don't know. But you really have to make sure what she says is accurate, because if they, meaning the Department of Justice, are going to pursue new charges or try to shed light on something and point a finger at someone, it better darn be really accurate and be credible and assessed for that.
Given the assessment from the DOJ about her credibility in the past, which is frankly, she's not credible, that you can't trust her to tell the truth. Perfect. If you are Todd Blanche going into these discussions, how do you approach someone like that?
This is something that Todd Blanche, I'm sure, has done, and it's really basic for all prosecutors. You're trained and to assess. But 100%, anyone listening to what she has to say understands and should recognize that there is an agenda. She may not be honest. She wants that pardon. She wants to be commuted. She wants something. But what's critical here is whatever she says, I want to corroborate. It comes from her mouth, but I also want to look to the files. Is it made out and borne out somewhere else? What other evidence confirms what she's saying is accurate? Because her saying it now, after not saying it for so long, if at all, really gives me pause and concern as law enforcement, because the tools that I have to really come after someone and accuse them of a crime are very powerful. And before I do that, I need to make sure it's accurate. What's in the file? What's in a search warrant? What did other witnesses say? What did the victim say?
Jeremy, I appreciate it. Thank you.